My son told me about a man who used to come to our house, give him money and treat him to ice cream, and my wife would talk to him for a long time in the kitchen. I was devastated, and my eldest daughter said it was all my fault. Then I discovered something that shocked me. The week before Christmas was always my favorite time of year. The quiet hum of my truck on the highway, the stretch of miles behind me, all pointed to one thing: home. Pulling into the driveway, I saw our house lit up in festive glory, icicle lights dripping from the gutters, a wreath on the door. Vanessa always went all out for the holidays, and I loved her for it. The kids barreled out the door as soon as they heard my horn, yelling, "Daddy!" Their hugs nearly knocked me over. Emma clung to my leg, her little arms squeezing tight, while Chris, our 10-year-old, launched into a monologue about a super weird day at school. Vanessa followed behind them, smiling as she leaned in for a quick kiss. She smelled faintly of her usual perfume but with a sharper edge, maybe wine. Dinner that night was everything I'd hoped for: laughter, stories, Vanessa's roast chicken. I was too tired to notice the tension right away, too happy to be home. It wasn't until bedtime that I got my first inkling something might be wrong. Chris asked me to tuck him in. He was at the age where he usually shrugged off bedtime routines, so I welcomed the chance. As I sat beside his bed, he leaned close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Dad, guess what?" he said, grinning. "Mom let us have ice cream for dinner last week." I laughed. "What? Ice cream for dinner? That's not like her." Chris shrugged. "Yeah, but she was acting funny. She said it was our little secret." His grin faded, replaced by a thoughtful frown. "Oh, and she had a friend over. Some guy. She said he was just a neighbor, but he stayed a long time. He gave me $5 to keep quiet." He giggled, clearly delighted by his newfound wealth. I froze. "What kind of friend, buddy? Did he say his name?" Chris shook his head. "I think it was Ethan or something. He was funny, though. He let us watch cartoons while Mom talked to him in the kitchen." My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. "Thanks for telling me, champ. Now get some sleep." I kissed his forehead and closed the door behind me, my heart pounding. Vanessa and I didn't have any neighbor named Ethan. When I came back downstairs, Vanessa was curled up on the couch, her wine glass in hand, scrolling on her phone. Her laugh sounded forced when I mentioned Chris's story. "Oh, that's nothing. He's just a handyman who helped with some repairs." Her answer didn't sit right with me, but I let it go. That night, while she slept, I lay awake, turning Chris's words over in my mind. The next morning, a glint of sunlight caught my eye on the kitchen counter, a stray earring, delicate and unfamiliar. It wasn't Vanessa's. That was when I knew I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. Something wasn't right, and I needed to find out what. The morning after Chris's little revelation, I couldn't shake the unease. Vanessa seemed cheerful enough, bustling around the kitchen with her usual efficiency. She hummed a Christmas tune as she poured coffee, but something about her energy felt off. Too bright, like she was trying a little too hard. As the kids played in the living room, I casually brought up the neighbor Chris mentioned. "So, this Ethan guy," I said, keeping my tone light. "What kind of repairs did he do?" Vanessa froze for just a second, a blink and you'd miss it pause, before turning back to the sink. "Oh, just little things. The sink was acting up, and you know how bad I am with tools." She gave a soft laugh, but it didn't feel genuine. I said, sipping my coffee. Funny Chris never mentioned it before. Sounds like he really liked the guy. Vanessa didn't respond right away, and when she finally did, it was to change the subject entirely. "Are you planning to string up those extra lights today? The ones we talked about for the back porch?" Her deflection was subtle, but it didn't fool me. As I went through the motions of the day, hanging lights, helping Emma build a gingerbread house, I kept replaying her reaction in my head. That pause. That too quick subject change. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when Vanessa went out to grab a few things for Christmas dinner, that I decided to investigate. I wasn't proud of snooping, but the little voice in my head wouldn't quiet down. I started with her phone, which she had carelessly left on the counter. The lock screen was innocent enough, pictures of the kids, her usual wallpaper, but when I swiped, I was greeted with a password. That was odd. Vanessa and I had always shared our passwords. Why change it now? Frustrated, I moved on to her laptop. It was sitting on the dining room table, half closed. She'd forgotten to log out, and when I opened it, her email was still pulled up. Most of it was the usual stuff, newsletters, holiday sales, emails from the kids' school. But then I saw it, a message from someone named Ethan. The subject line read, "Can't wait for tomorrow." My stomach sank. My hands hovered over the mouse, debating whether to click. When I did, the words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Last night was incredible. You always know how to make me feel alive. Let's sneak away again soon. Maybe New Year's. Let me know when he's gone again." I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. He. That was me. He was talking about me. I scrolled further, finding a string of emails dating back months. Each one painted a picture of a relationship that was far more than casual. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. 2 years. This had been going on for 2 years. I slammed the laptop shut, my mind racing. Vanessa had been lying to me for years, right under my nose. The holiday cheer around me felt like a cruel joke. How could I have been so blind? When she came home later, her arms full of shopping bags and her smile as bright as ever, I felt a sharp stab of anger. But I kept it in, for the kids' sake. I needed time to process, to figure out my next move. For now, I would play along. But I wasn't going to let this go. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Vanessa laughed with the kids, draped tinsel over the tree, and sipped her wine like nothing was wrong. But now, every gesture, every smile, felt like a performance. I couldn't help but watch her differently. Her warmth, her charm, they felt rehearsed. I thought about the emails I'd read, the name Ethan echoing in my mind like a taunt. After the kids went to bed, I pretended to be engrossed in a holiday movie. Vanessa curled up on the couch with me, resting her head on my shoulder. For a moment, I almost let myself believe this was real, that the woman I married was still the same person. But then her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She reached for it quickly, her movements just a little too hurried. I watched her eyes dart to the screen, her face softening into a small, secret smile before she tucked the phone under a pillow. "You're smiling," I said casually, not looking away from the screen. "Oh, just something from Karen," she replied, naming one of her friends. "She's organizing a last-minute cookie swap." "Sounds fun," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You should invite her over sometime. I haven't seen her in ages." Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Sure, maybe after the holidays." The lie tasted bitter in the air between us. The next morning, I decided to play the long game. Instead of confronting her outright or planting devices, I took a different route. Over breakfast, I casually said, "Vanessa, I was thinking about Chris's story. That Ethan guy must have made an impression on him. Maybe I should stop by and say thanks for helping out." Her face went pale for just a moment before she recovered. "Oh, he's probably too busy for that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It wasn't a big deal." "Still," I said, pressing gently, "it's not every day a neighbor goes out of their way. Which house does he live in?" Her spoon clinked against the cereal bowl. "He doesn't live nearby. He's, someone I found through a handyman service. You know, like TaskRabbit." She stood abruptly, grabbing her coffee mug. I've got to get the kids ready for school. We can talk about it later. I let it drop, for now. Later that day, when Vanessa took Emma out for a play date, I decided to check her car. It was a long shot, but sometimes people leave traces behind. As I sifted through the glove compartment, I found receipts, gum wrappers, and one thing that stopped me cold, a business card. The card was for a bar downtown, with Ethan scrawled on the back in her handwriting, along with a phone number. I snapped a picture of the card with my phone and carefully put everything back where I found it. That night, I sat in the garage, staring at the picture on my phone. A bar. What was Vanessa doing meeting someone there? I searched for the bar online, noting its location. It wasn't far, and I decided to check it out the next day. If Ethan was connected to this place, I wanted to see for myself. The next afternoon, I drove downtown and parked across the street from the bar. It was quiet, just a few cars in the lot. I walked in, my heart pounding, and sat at the bar. The bartender, a friendly-looking guy in his 30s, came over. "What can I get you?" I hesitated, then said, "Actually, I'm looking for someone. A guy named Ethan. I think he works here." The bartender raised an eyebrow. "Ethan? He doesn't work here, but he's in a lot. He's a regular." "Ah," I said, trying to sound casual. "I think my wife knows him. Just wanted to say hi." The bartender smirked. "Well, if she knows Ethan, she's probably seen him with the karaoke crowd. They hang out here a lot on weeknights." I nodded, pretending to laugh. "Good to know. Thanks." As I left the bar, my suspicions were confirmed. Vanessa wasn't hiring some TaskRabbit. She was meeting Ethan at this bar, and it wasn't for work. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as I drove home. The pieces were starting to come together, but I needed more. This wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about deciding what to do when I finally had it. That night, as Vanessa and I sat down for dinner with the kids, I felt like I was moving through a fog. Her laughter filled the room, warm and easy, but to me, it sounded hollow. Every glance she gave me felt like an act, every smile a mask. As the kids chattered about their day, I studied her, looking for cracks. She was good, too good. But now that I knew where to look, the signs were there. The way she avoided eye contact when I brought up the bar downtown, the quick way she changed the subject when Chris mentioned their neighbor again. After the kids went to bed, Vanessa settled on the couch with her usual glass of wine. I joined her, feigning normalcy. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone light, "I swung by that bar downtown today. You know, the one on Main Street? Looks like a fun spot." She froze for a fraction of a second, her wine glass halfway to her lips. "Oh. What were you doing there?" "Just curious," I said with a shrug. "The bartender mentioned someone named Ethan hangs out there a lot. Funny coincidence, huh?" Her laugh was forced, too quick. "Yeah, small world. Probably not the same Ethan, though." "Probably not," I said, letting the conversation drop. But her reaction was all the confirmation I needed. The next day, while Vanessa was out running errands, I decided to dig deeper. I remembered the business card I'd found in her car, the one with Ethan's name and number. I called the number, my heart pounding as the line rang. "Hello?" a man answered, his voice relaxed, friendly. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for Ethan." "Is this him?" "Yeah, this is Ethan." "Who's this?" I hesitated, then said, "Just someone trying to reach out about some work you might have done for my wife, Vanessa." There was a long pause. Sorry, man. I think you've got the wrong idea." "Do I?" I asked, my voice sharpening. "Because I think you've been seeing her behind my back." Ethan's tone turned defensive. "Look, I don't know who you are, but this isn't the place to have this conversation. I think it is, I shot back. And I think you owe me the truth. He sighed, his bravado faltering. I don't want trouble, okay? Maybe we should meet somewhere and talk. I agreed, setting a time and place for the next day. That night, Vanessa was unusually quiet. Maybe she sensed the shift, or maybe she was preoccupied with her own plans. Either way, I played along, waiting for the next move. The following afternoon, I met Ethan at a diner just outside town. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his late 20s, with a confident swagger that immediately set my teeth on edge. "You're James, right?" he asked as he slid into the booth. "That's right," I said, folding my arms. "And you're the guy who's been sneaking around with my wife." Ethan looked uncomfortable, his confidence cracking. "Look, man, I didn't know she was married at first, okay? She said things were complicated." "Complicated?" I snapped. "We've been married for 15 years and have 4 kids. Does that sound complicated to you?" He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. "She said you were always gone, that she was lonely. I didn't mean for this to happen, but it just did." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Vanessa hadn't just lied to me, she'd painted me as the villain, the absent husband who drove her into someone else's arms. "Doesn't make it right," I said, my voice cold. "Do you even care about what this is doing to my family?" Ethan looked at me then, guilt written all over his face. "I didn't think about it like that. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, standing up. "Stay away from my wife. You got that?" He nodded, looking genuinely shaken. As I walked out of the diner, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a tiny, bitter satisfaction that I now had confirmation. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I drove home from the diner with a storm raging in my chest. Ethan's words echoed in my head, each one twisting the knife deeper. "She said you were always gone." The justification felt like salt in the wound. I'd been away, sure, but it was for our family, to provide the home, the life, the Christmas tree they all enjoyed. When I walked in, Vanessa was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, but I barely noticed. She glanced up and smiled. "Hey," she said, brushing her hair back. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. I wrapped up what I needed to do. I leaned against the counter, watching her. She moved with her usual grace, humming softly to herself. For a moment, I wondered how she could act so normal when everything was crumbling beneath the surface. "Vanessa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She froze, the knife halfway through a carrot. "Now." "Now," I said firmly. She set the knife down and turned to me, her face carefully neutral. "Okay. What's on your mind?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the business card I'd found in her car, sliding it across the counter. "You want to explain this?" Her eyes flicked to the card, and I saw the color drain from her face. "James, it's not what you think." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Don't tell me it's not what I think. I met him, Vanessa. Ethan. I know everything." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but then her shoulders slumped. "How long?" I demanded. "James, please," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Can we not do this here?" "The kids." "They're not here," I said sharply. "Chris is at his friend's, and Emma's napping." "How long, Vanessa?" She looked down at her hands, twisting the dish towel in her fingers. 2 years, she whispered. 2 years. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. 2 years of lies, sneaking around, pretending everything was fine. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Was it worth it? Was he worth destroying our family? Her tears spilled over, but I felt no sympathy. I didn't plan for this to happen, she said. It just. Don't you dare say it just happened, I snapped. You made a choice, Vanessa. Every time you lied to me, every time you met him, you chose this. I was lonely, she said, her voice breaking. You're always gone, James. Weeks on the road, and I'm here, holding everything together. I needed someone. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. That's your excuse. I was working to give you everything, Vanessa. A home, a life. And you repay me with this? She didn't answer, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then I spoke, my voice low and cold. I'm done. You want him? Fine. You can have him. But you're not taking the kids. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. James, no. Please. Don't do this. The kids. The kids deserve better than this, I said, cutting her off. Better than lies and betrayal. I turned and walked out, my chest heaving with the weight of everything I'd just said. As I climbed the stairs to the bedroom, I heard her sobbing in the kitchen. But I didn't stop. In that moment, I felt nothing but resolve. This was the beginning of the end, and I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. The rest of the night passed in heavy silence. Vanessa stayed in the kitchen long after I left, and I holed up in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands. The reality of what had just happened weighed on me, pressing down like a lead blanket. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, tear-streaked, pleading. I wanted to hate her, but I wasn't there yet. Mostly, I just felt hollow. The next morning, the kids' laughter filtered upstairs, a reminder of the life we'd built. For their sake, I pushed my anger aside and came downstairs. Vanessa was in the kitchen making pancakes, the picture of a doting mother, but her eyes were red, and she didn't meet my gaze. Morning, Dad. Chris said, waving a forkful of syrup-covered pancake at me. Morning, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. I ruffled his hair as I passed, grabbing a cup of coffee. Vanessa turned her back to me, her hands shaking slightly as she flipped another pancake. We kept it together for the kids. Conversations were short and stilted, but we managed to get through breakfast without incident. Once the kids were outside building snowmen, Vanessa finally spoke. James, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. I didn't answer at first, staring into the swirling black of my coffee. Then I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. She took the seat across from me, her hands clasped tightly on the table. I don't know what to say, she began. Try the truth, I said coldly. She winced but nodded. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Ethan was. I don't know. A distraction, I guess. At first, it was just drinks, someone to talk to when I felt alone. But it got complicated. I laughed bitterly. Complicated? That's what you call it. Her eyes filled with tears again, but she held my gaze. I'm not proud of what I did, James. I hate that I've hurt you. I hate myself for it. Good, I said, my voice harsh. Because you've destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, was it worth it, Vanessa? Did he make you feel alive? She didn't answer, and the silence stretched between us. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said finally, my voice low. But I need to think about what's best for the kids. They don't deserve this mess. Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. I'll do anything to fix this, she sobbed. Anything. I stood, unable to listen anymore. I don't think it's that simple, I said, walking toward the door. We'll figure out the logistics later. Right now, I just need space. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, the cold air biting at my face. Chris and Emma were in the yard, their laughter a sharp contrast to the turmoil in my chest. As I watched them, I realized the path ahead wasn't going to be easy. There was no quick fix, no way to undo the damage that had been done. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let Vanessa, or anyone, take the kids from me. For now, I'd keep my head down, stay strong for them, and figure out the rest as I went. This was far from over. The next day brought a mix of excitement and trepidation. Our two older kids, Mia, 15, and Jake, 14, were arriving home after staying with Vanessa's parents for a few weeks. It had been too long since I'd seen them, and I was determined to push the chaos aside and enjoy some quality time together, at least for a little while. When they walked through the door, their energy immediately filled the house. Mia greeted me with a quick hug, her teenage coolness barely hiding her affection. Jake, on the other hand, tackled me with a bear hug, grinning ear to ear. "Hey, Dad. Missed you," Jake said, his voice cracking slightly as he pulled away. "Missed you too, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. Vanessa stayed in the background, her expression carefully neutral as she helped them unpack. For the rest of the afternoon, we managed to create a fragile semblance of normalcy. The kids shared stories about school, friends, and their grandparents' antics, and for a moment, I could almost believe things were fine. Later that evening, I sat down with Jake in the den, just the two of us. We played a game of chess, something we'd done since he was little. Despite the tension lingering in the house, our bond felt steady. Jake was a straightforward kid, and I appreciated his grounded nature. "Dad, is everything okay with you and Mom?" he asked suddenly, not looking up from the board. I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "We're working through some stuff," I said carefully. He nodded, moving a pawn. "You'll figure it out. You always do." His words, simple and sincere, felt like a balm to my frayed nerves. But any sense of peace evaporated when I sat down with Mia later that night. She was in her room, scrolling through her phone, and I knocked softly before stepping in. "Hey, Mia," I said. "Mind if I sit?" She shrugged. "Sure." I perched on the edge of her bed, trying to read her mood. "It's good to have you home," I said. "Yeah," she replied, her tone clipped. We chatted for a while, though her responses were curt. Finally, out of nowhere, she turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Do you know about Ethan yet?" she asked, her voice casual, as if she were asking about the weather. The words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, stunned. "Yes," I said slowly. Mia leaned back, crossing her arms. "Then you must understand that women need men's attention. You're always on the road. It was going to happen sooner or later." My stomach twisted. "Mia, that's not how relationships work," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. She rolled her eyes. "Come on, Dad. What did you expect? You're never here." Her words felt like a knife in the back. I had expected support, maybe even sympathy, but instead, I was being blamed. "Mia," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak, "I work hard for this family. Everything I do is for you, your siblings, and your mom. That doesn't excuse what she did." She shrugged again, looking at her phone. "Whatever, Dad. Just saying it's not all on her." I stood, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. "We'll talk more later," I said stiffly, walking out before I said something I'd regret. Back in the living room, I sat in silence, my thoughts racing. It was one thing to feel betrayed by Vanessa, but to hear those words from my own daughter. It was almost too much to bear. For the first time since all of this began, I started to wonder if I was truly alone in this fight. The house was quiet that night, but my mind was anything but. I replayed Mia's words over and over, the sharp sting of her casual dismissal echoing in my chest. Was that how she saw me? Some absentee father too caught up in work to notice the cracks forming in my family? I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every murmur from the kids' rooms, felt like a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. So I found myself in the kitchen, staring out the window at the moonlit snow, a cup of cold coffee in my hand. Vanessa walked in, her footsteps tentative. She hesitated in the doorway before stepping closer. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. "No," I said without looking at her. For a moment, she stood there, as if waiting for something. Finally, she spoke. "James, I know things are broken right now. But we can try to fix this. For the kids. For us." I turned to her, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "Mia told me she knew about Ethan," I said flatly. Her face paled. She said something to you." "She didn't just know, Vanessa. She defended you. Said it was my fault for being gone so much." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want them to know. I never wanted them to get involved in this." "Well, they are involved," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "And now I'm not just the husband you betrayed. I'm the father they think is to blame for all of it." Her tears spilled over, but I didn't care. I set the coffee cup down with a thud and walked past her, heading back upstairs. The next morning, I decided to address the tension head-on. I couldn't let Mia's words fester between us. After breakfast, I asked her to join me for a walk. She hesitated, but eventually shrugged and put on her coat. We walked in silence for a while, the crunch of snow under our boots the only sound. Finally, I stopped and turned to her. "Mia, I need to understand something," I said. "Why would you say that to me last night? About Ethan?" She looked down, kicking at the snow. "I don't know. I guess. I'm just mad." "At me?" I asked, my voice softening. "Yeah. I mean, kind of," she said, her voice shaky. "You're never here, Dad. You miss all the little things. And when you're gone, it's just Mom holding everything together. She's stressed all the time." Her words stung, but I forced myself to listen. "I'm sorry, Mia," I said. "I know I've been gone a lot. But everything I do for this family. For you, your brothers, your sister. I never wanted you to feel like I wasn't there for you." She looked up at me then, her eyes brimming with tears. "It just feels like everything's falling apart, and I don't know who to be mad at." I reached out and pulled her into a hug, feeling her shoulders shake as she cried. "I know, sweetheart," I said. "It's hard for me too. But no matter what happens, I'm still your dad, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together." She nodded against my chest, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. When we got back to the house, Vanessa was in the living room, her face a mix of curiosity and anxiety. Mia gave her a quick glance before heading upstairs, leaving the two of us alone. "What was that about?" Vanessa asked. "Just trying to make sense of everything," I said, my tone cold. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. "Not now. I need to figure out what's best for the kids, Vanessa. That's all I care about right now." She nodded, her expression crumpling as she turned away. For the rest of the day, I focused on the kids, throwing myself into playing games with Jake and helping Emma with her art project. But in the back of my mind, the reality of what lay ahead loomed larger than ever. The cracks were too deep. This family wasn't going to survive as it was. Something had to change, and soon. The next few days were some of the hardest of my life. The tension in the house was suffocating, every glance between Vanessa and me heavy with unspoken words. The kids were perceptive enough to know something was wrong, though they didn't ask. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat Vanessa down at the kitchen table. It was time to address the mess we'd found ourselves in. "Vanessa," I began, staring at the grooves in the worn wooden table. "I need to know why. Not excuses, not justifications, just why." She took a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she clutched her mug of tea. "I don't even know if I can explain it," she said softly. "I was lonely, James. And the drinking, it made everything worse. I didn't think clearly, and I didn't value what I had. What we had." Her voice cracked, and I could see the weight of her guilt bearing down on her. "I know I've hurt you. And I hate myself for it. But I want to fix this. I want to fix us." I sat in silence for a moment, letting her words sink in. Finally, I said, "I don't know if I can forgive you, Vanessa. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she nodded. "I understand," she whispered. "But," I continued, "the kids need us. They need their family. If we're going to stay together for them, I need you to promise me 2 things. "Anything," she said quickly. "First, that nothing like this will ever happen again. No more lies. No more secrets." She nodded fervently. "I swear. I'll never betray you again." "Second," I said, my tone firm, "you need to get help. The drinking, it's part of why this happened. And if you don't deal with it, we can't move forward." Vanessa hesitated, but then she wiped her tears and squared her shoulders. "I'll go to rehab," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of relief. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa made good on her promise. She checked herself into a rehab program for alcoholism, and I saw a glimmer of the woman I'd fallen in love with start to re-emerge. She was more present with the kids, more willing to take responsibility for her actions. But I knew that our marriage wasn't the only thing that needed fixing. For years, I'd poured everything into my work, sacrificing time with my family for a paycheck. It had been a choice I made for what I thought were the right reasons, but now I saw how much it had cost me. I made another decision. I was done being a truck driver. The long hours, the endless miles, it wasn't worth what I'd lost. Luckily, we weren't in dire straits financially. I had saved enough over the years to give us a comfortable cushion, and after a few calls, I found a job in the city. It didn't pay as much, but it let me be home every night, sitting at the dinner table with my kids. The adjustment wasn't easy. Mia was still distant, though she softened as time went on. Jake and Emma thrived with me around more, and I found myself savoring the little moments I used to miss, helping with homework, cheering them on at soccer games, tucking them into bed. Vanessa worked hard, too. Rehab wasn't a quick fix, but it was a start. She attended meetings, saw a counselor, and showed up for the family in ways I hadn't seen in years. We never pretended everything was perfect. There were days when the weight of what had happened felt unbearable. Days when I wondered if staying was the right choice. But we kept going. For the kids. For ourselves. For the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new from the rubble. In the end, I didn't know if I'd ever truly forgive Vanessa. But I knew this, I wasn't the same man who'd walked through the door that snowy December afternoon. I had my kids, my health, and a chance to be the father I wanted to be. And for now, that was enough.